Valentine boy, Vincent Valentine boy, EX Turk boy, horror transformation boy, fuck Shimmer boy, pro Lucretia boy. Let's get started on on the Sturgeon Cerberus. Going down on Purge. Better watch yourself, Hojo. Anyone mess with Lucretia, you're gonna end up with at the end of my Cerberus. I play no games. Got you goofy ass on got your goofy ass on my Hellmasker chainsaw. Don't even.
Hey, it's Noctis. Subscribe to Vincent Valentine EX Turk channel.
What's up, guys? Vincent Valentine EX Turk, and I am rocking the fro today. So yeah, I'm gonna wear my hair a little natural, and I'd use some this vegan shampoo. I forgot what it's called, but I'll probably leave annotations once I can find the name of the shampoo. But if you look for curls, it does that for you. But if you have natural curly hair, so yeah, I'll put it down what I use. But besides hair stuff, we're going to be focusing on a segment for Final Fantasy. Like all my other Final Fantasies, we're going to be talking about spin-off games. The one inside the actual, regular games, such as what you call a sequel to set regular games. Stuff that you would find, let's see, after the original number game. Such as stuff like Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII Prequel, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy 13-2, Lightning's Return, Final Fantasy X-2 are pretty much just the dominant stuff to continue the already established story of the original. That way they can actually increase. Now it's not gonna be necessary once you get the Final Fantasy VII remake, and 15's never gonna have a Final Fantasy 15-2, so with those are gonna be ones that don't follow the trend of having a compilation to their name, or should I say an extra canon is what I would call it, because they're extra stories within the series, such as 3 years down the line or 3 years before the events. Now, again, games like that are quintessential to the Final Fantasy lore. Pretty much what I'm saying is yes, the spin-off games are canon. If you define yourself going to Dissidious canon, then they're not. But if you go by regular canon, then yes. Or if you go by specifically Final Fantasy VII, you go by Final Fantasy VII's new canon, then the compilation does not have any way, or it is ever canon. But the point I'm trying to say is that the compilation of Final Fantasy games, established Final Fantasy number games, are the quintessential stories that are added to the lore of that Final Fantasy, because maybe it made a lot of money. The first game to ever make a game after its number one title, the first one, actually surprised, it was not Final Fantasy X-2. It was actually Final Fantasy IV, and then Final Fantasy IV the after years. Now, it got released later on in America, but Japan had the Famicom cartridge of Final Fantasy IV the after years. It was the first one to actually have a spin-off directly after the game. And then for Americans, it'd be Final Fantasy X-2, because Final Fantasy X did a good job and it sold well. Despite that there's people that are naysayers and they hate Final Fantasy X, for whatever reason it is, it still did well to get a sequel. Even though, let's be quite honest, the sequel was not as good. Not as good. I still play it, but X-2 was not as good. It was bad. It was pretty bad. Yeah. So then there's games like that. Then they went back to when the 25th anniversary for Final Fantasy VII, they made a movie part of the compilation, Dirge of Cerberus a year after, and then Crisis Core a year after Dirge of Cerberus, to actually put everything in pieces that Final Fantasy VII did not put in, except for the fact that Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus had their own characters and their own storyline, and it would interfere with the original, so they had to tone some stuff down. which makes sense. Like Genesis was never in the original Final Fantasy VII original, so I can see why they'd scrap them in the remake. And and then soon it became a trend. Final Fantasy 13, as much as anyone hates Final Fantasy 13 here, it still did well enough to get 13.2. It did well to get Lightning's Return. It did well to do all of that stuff, you know. So it did well. That's all we know, is it did very well. And I'm so glad it did. You know, I'm so glad it did. The only thing they teased this year at E3 was the Final Fantasy 15 VR, but I guess I'm a little bit off topic. Then there's the off-brand games that you probably did not even know exist. Games such as Final Fantasy Legends for the Game Boy Pocket 1 and 2, Final Fantasy Crystal, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles on the GameCube, Final Fantasy Crystal Barriers on the Wii, which, you know, I'll pull out the game. This is actually a spin-off that are different stories. These do not go within the Final Fantasy lore at all. Like the traditional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the traditional 1 through 15 storyline, but these are just extra legend material. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Star Wars, but think of Star Wars Legends. This is pretty much what stuff like this is, such as Final Fantasy Legend games, Final Fantasy Crystal, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and then it's the sequel to Crystal Chronicles, known as Crystal Bearers, which, you know, this one plays differently because the Wii thing is the characters' powers are very different than, you know, the traditional Final Fantasy stuff. I kind of wish they'd throw this rush from Final Fantasy Crystal Bears into the mix of Dissidia and T, you know, and make it play out well. But these aren't really like completely canon. These are just extra stories that Square Enix does. Because one thing about Square Enix, they over-franchise their stuff. Square Enix, not just with Final Fantasy, I mean, think of Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts, they got so many different variations of Kingdom Hearts besides the 1, 2, and 3 that it's hard to keep up with stuff. Except those go together. All those Kingdom Hearts go together within the story. These games, however, don't. But these are just pretty much add-on stories, you know, add-on stuff. Since Nintendo Wii came out in 2006, and it was the biggest selling console, you know, a little bit at the time, Square Enix wanted to franchise their games, and that's what they do. Even though they're with Sony, they do make games for other systems. They have made Final Fantasy 11 original for the Xbox 360, you know, and they have done the Lightning Saga on Xbox 360 as well as Final Fantasy 15 on Xbox One as well, because they want to they're about franchising. So, but that's not near or here. This one was especially a Nintendo exclusive because they just want to, in order for you to be a collector of all the Final Fantasies, you had to buy it from each console they made it for, because they want, you know, they want to. Square Enix is pretty much huge on capitalism. You know, they sell all these games, you know, to different places, and you know, they make exclusives you can't get on any other game system except for the one, such as some of the HD collections for Final Fantasy X, 12, you know, which was PS3, PS4, well, except PS4 for the 12 one. You know, besides that, because they were original PlayStation 2, so that kind of makes sense to do that. Or the Kingdom Hearts, you know, 1.5, all that stuff, because it was on PlayStation 2, you know. But there's other games out there that Final Fantasy has made. And there's Echoes of Time, which is on the Wii, which Echoes of Time is a lot harder to find than this game. Like, you're more likely to find this game, and this is actually pretty rare because this was only sold when the Wii came out, and then nobody really picked up this game anymore. But nonetheless, there's Echoes of Time, Chocobo Dungeons, and even other games that don't have Final Fantasy titles, such as Urgits. And Urgits was a PlayStation 1 game that had Final Fantasy 1 characters versing these Namco characters, because Urgits was created by Namco, and then Square Enix bought that game out and put their characters in You know how that is. Let's have to say, oh yeah, there's a lot more. And then there's another Final Fantasy game that's really, well, a game created by the people who made Final Fantasy 7. It was called, and it was on the same system, called The Last Story. You're lucky if you even were able to get a copy of The Last Story, because The Last Story, the most cheapest one you can find is a used version for $30. But The Last Story goes to $90 to $100, and it's created by the same people who made Final Fantasy 7. I hopefully, if I ever get like even better paychecks, I will find a used one at a GameStop if I get lucky, and I will buy that and put it in my collection. Even if I don't play it right away, you know, when I do play my Wii, I will be doing streaming spin-off games. But I wanted to talk about spin-off games so people understood the difference. Like, okay, let me show you. These two games already go to the established games that they belong to, such as if you see 10 right here, and with the number 2, this is after 10. And this one don't have a specific number, Dirge of Cerberus, except for the Final Fantasy 7. But if you play the game, it's about Vincent Valentine's. It's about Vincent Valentine's journey, you know, and also last part of the saga of Final Fantasy 7, where Vincent fights fights a group of Shinra underground soldiers that Shinra have created. And now they're out of underground terrorizing the world, so Vincent goes around saving the world, and it ends Final Fantasy 7. And this ends Final Fantasy 10, except this one has multiple endings. You have to get the perfect ending if you want to see Titus again. These two are already established to their own games. So, you know, we're done talking about those games, because those two are established to their own games. And then there's extra stories that Square Enix has, I don't know, a lot of time on. Square Enix has a lot of time on their hands. So, Square Enix pretty much want to franchise more Final Fantasies, and it's kind of easy just to put a story, character model. They'll probably even use some of their other models. Like, I think some of the models in Crystal Bears was actually from Final Fantasy 11. At least some of the character types right here. And if you could see, character kind of resembles Final Fantasy 11. I have not played Final Fantasy 11, so don't ask me about Final Fantasy 11. But pretty much, yeah, pretty much, these are just extra stories to go with the collection. These do not actually go in the actual numerical Final Fantasy saga. Except for one game, and that's the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy Tactics, and only the Final Fantasy Tactics 1. Not War of the Lions or any other, or Tactics on the GB. But Final Fantasy Tactics on the PlayStation goes into 12, and that's the only one of the extra story spin-offs. Because Square Enix is about franchising their stuff, and, you know, I'd still go buy these kind of games just to play, just for some shits and grins, and, you know, and stuff like that, so you can see the difference between their writing of their numerical games and then the writing to just these games right here. So that's what I wanted to talk about. It's an E3 special topic on the Final Fantasy spin-offs. So I'd say may the crystal be with you. Have a nice day. I got one video in, yay. And I got to rock my fro on camera, so that's cool.